Many individuals throughout the years have fought for women's rights in every way possible. One of these individuals, Betty Friedan, went from writing books to giving speeches and curating movements. My name is Lauren Lippitz, and today I'll be informing you about the life of Betty Friedan. Among those who fought for women's rights, Betty Friedan was one to prove to have a powerful impact on women, society, and the country. Friedan was a writer, feminist, and women's rights activist who wrote Feminine Mystique in 1963, which explored the idea of women finding fulfillment beyond traditional roles. She also co-founded the National Organization for Women in 1966, serving as its first president. As leading voice of the women's rights movement, Betty Friedan's goal was for a political movement of women and men working towards a new society of equality, prospering feminism in the United States. Because I have always been interested in the history of women's rights, I thought Betty Friedan would be the perfect civil rights leader to discuss and inform individuals about during a time that such problems still exist today, and however it came to be. Betty Friedan was born on February 4, 1921, in Illinois, to parents from Russia and Hungary. Right from the start, she was known to be rebellious in school, and when it came to her column being turned down in the newspaper, she retaliated by starting her own magazine. When attending college, she became editor-in-chief of the college newspaper, and she used this medium to promote social and political issues such as anti-war and Marxist views. Friedan later graduated in 1942 with her bachelor's degree in psychology at Smith College. She has well-received fellowship from the University of California in Berkeley to work along with the famous psychologist Erik Erikson, but only spent a short amount of time there. In the mid-1940s, Friedan relocated to New York City to increase her involvement with Marxism and other political issues, where she joined the world of journalism. While working for a short time as a reporter, in 1947 she married Carl Friedan. The couple later had 3 children, Daniel, Jonathan, and Emily. After the couple's first 2 children were born, Friedan stayed home to take care of her family. She began to feel restless and wondered if other women felt the same way as her. She wanted to know if other women were willing and able to be more than stay-at-home moms. To find her answer, Friedan took a survey of other graduates from Smith College, and the results of her survey started the beginning of her book, The Feminine Mystique. In this book, Friedan encourages women to seek new opportunities for themselves, which created a social revolution by getting rid of the idea that all women wanted to be stay-at-home moms. Once this began, Friedan's role in the women's rights movement became significant and very impactful. Her book, Feminine Mystique, was a bestseller and ended up being translated in many foreign languages. Her main idea for the book was that women as a class suffered a variety of more or less subtle forms of discrimination, but were in particular the victims of a persuasive system of delusions and false values under which they were urged to find personal fulfillment and identity. Under these assumptions, these women were expected to cheerfully devote their lives to their husbands and children. Later in 1966, Friedan co-founded the National Organization for Women, serving as its first president, while pushing for women to have a greater role in the political process. While doing so, she also fought for abortion rights by establishing the National Association for the Repeal of Abortion Laws in 1969. In 1971, Friedan had part in helping to create the National Women's Political Caucus with other leading feminists such as Gloria Steinem and Bella Abzug. One of Friedan's most known speeches was one that she gave at the testimony before the Senate Judicial Committee in 1970. It was given at the time to testify against Judge Carswell on the basis of his proven insensitivity to problems that of the 53% of the United States citizens who are women, and specifically on the basis of his discrimination in a court decision in 1969 against working mothers. The speech was important to give, especially due to the fact that women weren't being given equal opportunities as men, discriminated to the max. In her speech, she discusses a new movement in this country for full equality for women in truly equal partnership with men, whereas Judge Carswell had part in the judiciary action which would permit employers to refuse to hire women who have children. This was absurd because men who had children were allowed to do as they pleased. The case at the time involved a woman named Ida Phillips, and she was refused employment because she had preschool-aged children, even though the company said they would hire a man who had preschool-aged children. Women are as worthy and hardworking as men, or may even be more. That's for you to decide. But why does one sex get to have a job and a career with children, but the other one isn't? In order to have an inspiring and effective speech, it takes several elements of rhetorical skills to create one that will reach its audience, and Betty Friedan used numerous techniques to develop her own speech at that time in committee. After reading Betty's speech given that day, I felt like there were good points of ethos throughout it. Ethos are means to convince an audience of the author's credibility or character. These would show the audience that Betty, or he or she, is a credible source and is worth listening to. This may be introducing your own expertise or by using correct grammar. It could be your influence by position, self-confidence, and nonverbal communication, language, common ground, and interaction, as well as showing that you care. It is important to have this in a speech to grab your audience's attention fully in order for them to understand where you're coming from and what point you're trying to get across. Betty Friedan presented reputation, authority, similarity, and empathy throughout her speech and presence. Her reputation stands out as she was the president of the National Organization for Women, and she also wrote a phenomenal book about women fighting against gender norms. And when reading her speech, I felt passion, I felt confidence, and I felt power. It was as if she took true authority at the stance because she believed so deeply in her cause, which we all know, well, after reading this and hearing this, you know that. Similarity comes in where this was a time where women across the country wanted to be able to work without a problem. They wanted to receive true recognition as well and not face gender discrimination in the workplace for what they wanted their career to be. Therefore, it was something that almost all women could relate to, and with that comes empathy. Pathos are extremely important to the development of speech because it is the emotional end of it. It means to persuade an audience by appealing to their emotions, and as we all know, emotions are a very powerful thing. Authors use pathos to invoke sympathy from an audience as well as to make the audience feel what the author feels. Pathos can be developed by using meaningful language, emotional tone, emotion-evoking examples, stories of emotional events, and so on. In her speech, pathos were clearly used throughout to ensure that her passion and emotion on the subject would get across. With gender discrimination being a major issue at the time, it was easy to show how emotional the subject was and how important it was to her and the woman she was fighting for. She used powerful words, she brought out stories, her vision and goals for what she wanted, as well as showing that she cares and senses. Her stories and vision brought the speech alive and got her point across exponentially. She tried to inspire. She wanted her audience to realize what was being done was wrong and shameful, as well as going against the rights of citizens of the United States. Although the pathos and ethos throughout her speech were spectacular and got her point across, I felt as if her logos made the speech strong and more put together. Logos are the means to convince an audience by the use of logic or reason. And wouldn't this be common sense since we're talking about civil rights? Not so much with this being back in 1970. Obviously, there's discrimination worse than we have now. To use logos would be to cite facts, statistics, historical analogies, and so on. In her speech, Friedan stated facts by using dates and citing her sources. She used clear data that was public knowledge, among so much more. Common logos used are facts, data, figures, research, surveys, statistics, expert knowledge, examples, demos. The logos really made her speech what it came to be, in my opinion, focusing more on the facts and research. At the end of it, she stated, "In New York City, male but not female teachers are paid for their time spent on jury duty. In Syracuse, New York, male but not female teachers are paid for athletic coaching. In Arizona, a female law professor is fighting a rule that forbids her to be hired by the same university that employs her husband in another department. And in California, a wife is challenging a community property law which makes it obligatory for a husband to control their joint property." These facts ended the speech powerfully and very much strong, proving her point that women are discriminated completely in the workplace and all over the country. Rhetorical stylistic devices are important to incorporate into a speech because these different techniques help grab the attention of the audience by using such styles to create more of an in-depth speech. I noticed in her speech that she used anaphora to get across the more emotion and feeling and important matter of empathy proven. Anaphora is a deliberate repetition of the first word or set of words in a sense or phrase. Betty used it in her speech by saying, "How would you feel?" several times in a row, to make her audience think about how would they feel if it were them who were denied employment due to having a child or children. Although I found the speech as a written text, I can tell just by reading it that she had good oral delivery throughout the speech. And as I read it, it felt consistent, and her choice of language proved she knew what she was talking about, and she knew exactly how to come about the subject. Betty Friedan fought for women's rights from the very start, and it is important to recognize that even though the issues that women experienced back in the day were more severe, much has improved. Women are still fighting for equality, and she inspires many to do so today. Although she passed away in 2006, she is remembered as one of the leading voices of the women's rights movement of the 20th century. She fought consistently for an agenda where the working woman was supported by child care, health care, housing, and other facilities, as well as aimed for a political movement of women and men working towards a new society. Her most recognized work, The Feminine Mystique, is regarded by historians as among the most influential nonfiction books of the 20th century, with more than 3 million copies of the book being sold. Even after her death, Friedan continued to personify women's struggle for equity, and her work that started with this all is still being carried today by the three organizations that she helped to establish. Therefore, carry on her legacy. Thank you.